Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we're live on Facebook. Go. Got it. Take it away, Kellie.
Oh, good morning. It's so exciting to be here again on a Thursday morning with my colleagues from NDILC. We're so excited to have another great topic today. And this one, there's been so much written about it. There's been so much discussion about it. But today we're going to talk about the skill of listening. And some people may consider it not a skill. I consider it a skill. This is the National Association of Women in Real Estate and Business. Desiree, Teresa, Tami, welcome. My colleagues are all here, and these discussions are so much fun because we bring women together from all different industries. Previously, I'd worked at UPS. I've been in the logistics industry for years, and my colleagues here have been in real estate in various dimensions for years. And so it's interesting to get the different perspectives. So one thing that is very common, though, are the skills that we've been talking about, the principles that we have. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about listening. And I'm going to throw out a couple different quotes just to start us off. You know, I think many of us, at least of my age, can remember, their mothers saying, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And that was kind of her way of saying, be a little quiet and listen a little more, So that was the first quote I think of when I think of listening. And then the second quote is a UPS quote. And it always went something like this, they don't care about what you know until they know you care. And I think, when you think of those two in combination, you really can't care very much about someone unless you're willing to listen to them. And I think listening is an outward skill that shows that you respect the person, that you want to hear their opinion. And in today's world, we're not doing very much listening. We're really not. Everyone wants to be the mouthpiece. And everyone, I think, somehow believes that they have all the answers and that they are extremely right. So I think it's one of those skills that's kind of lost its importance along the way. And so I'm very excited to hear from everyone today on how listening has affected them in their careers, maybe how listening has even affected them in their personal life, things that they've learned about listening as we went through our careers and as we're going through our careers, and how we can maybe get back to a more civil society that listens a little bit more. So I'm going to start out here with just a quick story, and then I'm going to turn it over to I'll just go around the horn, Tami, Teresa, and then Desiree. But of course, jump in, guys, anytime you have a comment. When I think about listening at UPS, we did a ton of training. And it was a fantastic management experience because they would send the managers through many courses on different management skills. And there was one game we played. And you were out to win the gold. Of course, competitive as always. That's how UPSers are. We all got in there trying to win that gold. And along the way on the game, there was an old man who was homeless that was sitting on the side. Well, none of us stopped to talk to the old man because he was homeless. He wasn't very successful. Obviously, he couldn't have anything to say, nothing that we could learn, blah, blah, blah. So none of us, it took us like hours to win the game. What we realized at the end of the game, what they told us was that if you had just talked to the homeless old man over there, he could have told you the direct route to where you are going. And he could have told you where to stop along the way to get the resources you needed and what had worked and what hadn't worked in the past. And you think about how many times we pass by others' opinions, others' knowledge, others' wisdom, because we look at them and we make a snap judgment. And we just decide there's no possible way they could add anything to my knowledge base or the conversation we're having, right? So I thought to myself from that time forward, I really tried hard to listen to my employees. And when I did, even when I was terminating someone, disciplining someone, when I sat and listened, it always changed the conversation. And I always learned more than I had known before. So I'm going to start off just with that opening and kind of throw it out to Tami and let you talk a little bit about listening and what you think of listening and maybe what you've seen in the past.
Well, yeah, thank you. And it's great to be here and to see all you ladies in pink. I think a couple of things that I think are incredibly important. Number one, as a leader, I think it's very important to actively listen. And by actively listening, really demonstrating that you're totally paying attention. If it's something that's complex, I don't even hesitate to ask is it okay if I take some notes, for them to know that I'm taking it really seriously. If there isn't an opportunity for me to do that, a lot of times I'll walk away after the meeting and write down some notes so that I remember specifically what it was that they had for the biggest concern or what they were talking about. And sometimes even sending them a link to something or a note or a gift afterwards. And it doesn't have to be ridiculously big, but just something that showed that you heard. They were heard and you heard what they had to say. Maybe it's something that they have for a dream or something they're passionate about, and you can send them a book that's going to help them get closer to where their dreams are. But I think that demonstrating you listened by sending something really makes a big difference. I find for conflict resolution, there's nothing better. People want to be heard. And so giving them the opportunity, hey, look, in 24 hours, we're all going to meet because I understand that everyone wants to be heard and that nobody wants to harm another person. And by setting the stage, a lot of times when they come to the table, they come with solutions and they do realize there's another opinion so that everyone is learning to listen more. I find a couple of things that work for me for being able to have the conversation. I care enough about you to have this conversation. I care enough about you to listen to this conversation, but saying, tell me more. Help me understand, paint the picture for me so that you can keep them talking, because a lot of times the first one or two things they say aren't really what they're concerned with. They're not comfortable yet, and they need to be in a place of trust so they can share what's really going on in their world. And then you'll find, because you are willing to do it, a lot of times they assume that we're too busy. Because of what our roles are, they assume that we're too busy. And so when you can take a step back and say, tell me more and help me understand, they won't rush through it. They'll stop making those assumptions, and hopefully you'll really get to what it is that's going on. And once you demonstrate it once, they're definitely willing to come back. And everyone really wants to matter. They want to be part of something better. And I think those key two words, a part of, I think that's probably about it for me.
Those are great points, Tami. And you mentioned something. I wonder if you can expound on it a little bit. Actively listening. You mentioned taking notes, sending someone something afterwards to show that you've heard. Are there anything, or what could you do in the moment? What do you do in the moment? I think
that it's leaning in and giving incredible eye contact so that you really show you're listening. I watch people multitask, and all of a sudden they're on their phone, and they're supposed to be in the middle of a conversation. And if I say, do you mind if I take notes? Just want to write down a few points so I don't forget it, that's out of courtesy and respect. But if I'm not using my phone, if I'm not distracted by anything else, I'll even sometimes just say, you know what, I'm going to shut off my phone because I really want to make sure that I hear everything you have to say. And it's kind of a busy day or whatever, or my phone rings a lot or whatever you want to say for an answer back. But when I lean in and you're really paying attention and giving them straight on eye contact, then they can tell that you're really actively listening. You're not just sort of there, because so often people are thinking of what they're going to say next instead of what it is that somebody is actually saying.
Oh yeah, thinking of the rebuttal, right? Automatically thinking of the rebuttal. I find it funny too. The phone, another big thing. Just, can we put our phones down for a couple of minutes? Just a couple of minutes while we're talking. And that eye contact, to me, that's like being present in the moment, where you can literally, focus in on that person and what they're saying. I think it's huge. You mentioned some great points. I know, Teresa, what would you add to that? Oh, first, you need to unmute. And secondly, hey, what about the hat? What's going on with the hat?
You've got to unmute.
Unmute.
Muted myself, not just on my microphone. So absolutely, I agree. And the hat, I'll tell you, it's Queen's Jubilee. And I love celebrating any type of costume or anything. And of course, I love the way the British always do their beautiful hats. So that's the reason. And also, of course, celebrating several things this month. And I just kind of want to make sure we call those out. Pride Month obviously starts in June. So celebrating Pride with our LGBTQ plus partners, as well as it is National Homeownership Month as well. And we're all in real estate, right? Well, most of us are, Tami and I are. And then of course, on Juneteenth, it'll be coming up. So I just kind of wanted to do call out for those reasons. And I also agree with you. And one of the things that we learned, I took a course early on in my career because I thought it was an amazing course on listening, because obviously one of the things that a lot of realtors make the mistake of is actually don't listen to their clients' needs. And that's really critical to understand what somebody actually needs when they're looking for a home, and to validate what they have said. And so repeating is one way that you can, right, Tami, you can actually confirm that, number one, you were listening, and that you are also coming back and repeating what they told you in a summary. So what you're saying is you're looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, obviously more would be great, but what's most important that you have to have is a garage. And all these items help you with your listening, because I think that was always an issue for me. I like to talk a lot. And, I love that saying that my mother always used to say, right, the 2 ears and 1 mouth, because obviously that was something I heard all the time as well. But definitely validating. And there's a great book, and I know we're going to talk about books that I also read that I thought was really insightful. And it was done by Michael Sorensen. It's called I Hear You. I don't know if y'all have read that book. No. But it's a really short read. And you know me, I don't like to read a lot. So that's what I loved about it. It's a short read, but it was a study that was done at a bed and breakfast. And that study was done and it was just the owners of that bed and breakfast who invited, over the course of a year, honeymoon couples to their bed and breakfast. And so what they would do is that they started to notice a pattern. They started to see a pattern of those individuals who seemed to really validate what the other couple was saying, seemed to last longer in the relationship than those that did not. And by validating, it just meant you don't always have to agree with what they're saying. You just have to confirm with empathy and with, that you understand what they're saying, and to pay attention, like, Tami was just saying, right? Making sure you're paying attention. So an example would be, one of the spouses would say, oh my God, look at that beautiful car out in the driveway. Oh my God, that's a gorgeous car. I love it, with excitement. And the way the spouse would respond would show a little bit of whether or not they were validating. They would either come and look, oh my God, you're right. What a you're absolute. I love it. Or they would go, yeah. Oh yeah. That's nice, honey. Okay. So it all depended, right? Well, here's what the study in the end that they showed actually proved, that 90% of the people that actually, those couples that validated with care and empathy stayed together. And only 30%, right, of those that did, that number, that the ones that failed was because they only validated 30% of the time. So you can see there's really a correlation between that. And I think that was just a real big eye-opening for me, because a lot of times we listen, but we want to always respond back or give advice. That's not what you're supposed to do, unless they ask for it, right? You just listen with empathy. Oh, I feel you. I understand what you're saying. Oh my God, I get that. So that is something a lot of times people want from you, not necessarily an answer to their situation, because a lot of times they know what they need to do. They just want somebody to validate their anger, their concern, or what's happened. And if you'll find, a lot of times when customer service calls are taken, people that validate the reason someone is angry, by the end of the call, that person is like, oh, you don't need to do that. I was just want somebody to address it. I'm really upset. And thank you for, have you ever noticed that those are the most successful calls? Okay. Anyway, as you can tell, it is something that I'm definitely doing a lot of talking, and not a lot listening. So it's somebody else's turn now.
No, Teresa, you hit on so many great points. I mean, we started with careers, but personal life is huge. You know, how listening impacts every part of your life. I mean, it can, if you get good at listening, it helps you everywhere. Absolutely. You know, I dealt with salespeople as vice president of sales for UPS, and we had the same concerns with our sales group that you were talking about in the real estate world. You know, our salespeople would go in and they'd go in with a solution. They've already figured out the problem, right? And they're just telling the customer what they need versus listening to what the customer really is saying they want and that they need. So you bring up some great points. And then obviously with spouses, I think it's even more important.
Well, and what it showed was that was not just with your spouse, it's with your child. That study is for everyone in your world. It's for every client that calls you who's mad because they are not closing on time, you know, or it was really kind of that, those lessons are the lessons that can be universal. And I think that's what really hit me about the book. And the other thing that I just have to add is sometimes you will find, like I've had meetings and there'll be one person who really doesn't say much, right? There's that one person, but then that small voice will give you the most at the end, you know, once they do speak, what they say is the most incredible solution or advice. You know, when they finally speak, you're like, wow, that was unbelievable. Thank you for saying that. That solves our situation, right? So a lot of times, because they're good listeners, they're not just talking, they're listening. And then by the end, they're able to provide a really good, strong solution. So I've learned that they are the best. People that listen are just the best at solution solving.
Thank you, Teresa, for stealing the comments that I was going to make.
Jump in, Desiree.
Sorry about that.
Good. You kept going on. I said, okay, knock that one, not one. And I was going to relate everything you said to my children. That was one of the things that, you know, I always wanted to help. You know, my mother taught me to always help give advice. The problem was, it wasn't they wanted to hear my advice after. They just most importantly wanted to have me pay attention to them and listen to them and just be there to absorb and ask questions about what they were talking about and not turn around to that point. So totally agree with you and totally agree with the fact of waiting to the last moment to sit there. And it's always that last 2 minutes. Where were you at the beginning of the conversation? To your point, they were listening at the end, and they usually are the greatest solvers of whatever the situation is. And that's why I love the boardroom. And that's why I love getting everyone at the table, no matter what economic level, no matter what classification, no matter what age. The bottom line is get everyone at the table to have that conversation. So Tami, you are, before I go into mine, you are an incredible, you know, to-do list, checklist, you know, systems person that I know. How do you put your list together when you've taken notes and you have it? I have a Bible, but how do you schedule your time to take the 5 minutes in between your back-to-back appointments and on an airplane everywhere? How do you manage to make sure that you take your notes and allocate time between the meetings? Because then they start blurring when you've done too much too fast, and especially with the travel. So I'd like to know your secret.
Well, I book off an hour a day for what if. And I book off an hour every single day. So that might be Monday morning, Wednesday morning, and Friday morning, and Tuesday afternoon, and Thursday afternoon, you know, and Saturday morning. But that what if, you might end up with an opportunity to do an interview. You might end up with an opportunity for something that you didn't have, or there might be some conflict resolution that's there. But it's always the opportunity to be able to write a couple of personal notes and to summarize the things that you've had going on so that you don't miss out on those opportunities. I keep an Excel spreadsheet. I know that's as old-fashioned as you can possibly get, but it just helps me to stay on track with people so that they know that they're really important. And back in the day, because now I'm dating myself to death, I actually kept file cards on people, and I would read the file card afterwards so that when I had a conversation with them, it was specific to what they were talking about. But I find, you know, we use a different term in New England, but stuff hits the fan every day.
Yeah.
And so if you can have an opportunity to have an hour booked off so that you can address it and move on, you're not waking yourself up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you didn't handle it. And stress comes from unfinished business, that you handled it that day. You can always proactively do something else, but booking off that hour every single day so that there is a space gives you and keeps you in control, and it definitely keeps you in the present tense. I did want to mention one thing about kids, because I think that that is so important. You know, your family, whether that's your significant other, no matter what you have for a significant other, or how your family is structured, or if you have children, one of the things that worked out really well for us, our whole family did martial arts together 3 times a week, but we made a commitment that on the way there and on the way back, that we would not have our phones on. And so we had the uninterrupted time in the car. And I can tell you that for each of the kids, it wasn't the ride there. That was usually chit chat, but on the ride back, after everybody had worked out together and we were on this ride back, they had enough uninterrupted time together so that they would talk about whatever was bothering them. If there was somebody giving them a hard time at school, or they were worried about someone, that honest conversation, some of that needed to have blank spaces. I always ask my kids on Sunday night, what would you like to do this week? And because of our busy schedules, I would do it as quick in the week as possible. Maybe Megan wanted to go to the library and William wanted to lift weights, and whatever any of them wanted to do, I would just do it as quick in the week as possible. I wouldn't say, yes, we're going to do that Wednesday at 5. I would just do it as quick in the week as possible, so I didn't have to break a promise. But I found that same thing. It was that uninterrupted drive. Maybe you stopped and had lunch in the middle, or you went and did whatever the activity was, and it was always on the ride home. If something was bothering them, that's when they would say it. Sometimes you literally have to put in the time in order to have the opportunity to listen to the elephant in the living room.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I think you just mentioned, Tami, you know, what one of the biggest barriers is to listening, and that's time. It takes time to listen. You know, many of us are running, Desiree and I were talking this morning, many of us are running at such a pace these days. I mean, you know, no matter what your role is, if you're a mom with little kids, if you're a president of an organization, everyone is running faster and faster. And we don't have the time that we used to have. And again, partially due to the phones and what technology has done. So I think your idea of setting that phone down, right? Whether that's at the dinner table, the breakfast table, on the way to school, on the way to work, wherever it is, after an event like you did, Tami, or after something where the family was together, that's critical. And then you think about employees. How do you find the time for them? You know, UPS, when I was there, was over 410,000 employees. Now I think it's over 500,000 employees. I mean, it's difficult, and it becomes a priority to try to schedule time. And I think you gave a great system there, you know, of putting an hour aside, because I think that's important.
I think that's fantastic. And so my question to you to follow up, Tami, is, do you find yourself on something very important as you're going from meeting to meeting to make that note then, so that you have a bullet so you can remind yourself in that 1 hour segment, versus then getting a blur? Was it this person you talked to, this person you talked to? Or do you feel that you're...
I actually send myself a message.
There you go.
I do that too. I text myself. Oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one.
Message, and that way, at the end of the day, I can scroll through and I won't forget, because sometimes it does get so busy that you're like, who was that?
Right.
What was that thing that I was going to do the second I got home before I got back to?
I love that. I love that. See, I started that. And so to me, that is, I started taking pictures to remind myself I saw something I had to do. I don't care about, you know, marking the computer, tagging it, whatever, because we get to the point we get fatigued, right? And so if we're sitting and we have that access to know that, oh yeah, I got to do this, then it's go with it. So I love that. So my thing, and I
Wait a minute. I want to hear, Teresa, what are you doing? Are you doing the same thing? Are you like texting yourself? I just want to see.
I do. I text myself and take photos. Like if I need to remember to do something. One thing we do that I really absolutely think has been precious, and something that Gino does on a regular basis on listening, is that we get accountability partners every single month. We change. So those accountability partners, we actually talk to every single day for 5 or 10 minutes. And you set your time once you switch and believe it or not, I thought this was impossible to do, but I've done it with every almost every president of our company. Like I just did it with Boomer Foster, who's president of Long and Foster. And he and I talked every morning at 8 a.m. for 10 minutes, every morning. And except for on the weekend, right? And it's always, there are 18 interview questions, and they're interview, like your interview instead of interview. And we have to go through each question by the end of the month. We've had to answer our questions, right? And those interviewing questions start with, tell me about yourself. What was your high school like? Were you involved? Were you active? You know, who in your life played the biggest impact on you, and why? And looking back, when you're older, what do you want to be remembered for? So we go through these 18 questions the entire time. And, of course, I write notes on every single person. And what you find is sometimes when you think you have nothing in common with a person, and you go through those 18 questions, I'm like, oh my God, you went to, you're a Gamecock. Well, I'm a Bulldog, all these things. You grew up in the South. I never knew that about you. You're up in the Northeast. All these things, you start to create a listening pattern, because you want to listen, because you want to hear what they have to say. And it allows you to get to know that person so intimately that by the end of the month, you can't help but be friends. I mean, there's a commonality in that listening that helps you now understand that person a little better. And then the next time you call them, you ask them, hey, how are your kids? Or, how are things? You're able to really keep up. And that is the best thing, I think, that I've learned from our company transitioning. And then Gina will call us every single week and just check in for 5 minutes. Hey, how's it going? What are you doing? You doing okay? All right, just checking in, what you got going on. He just wants to make sure that we know he cares. And if you do have something that is concerning, hey, I do want to talk to you about something. Thanks for calling me. Here's where it goes. Okay, let's book some time. Let's do it. Because, I've got another call, but he'll put it on his calendar. And if he has time, then he'll address it, but he's just really good about it. And it's taught me to be a better person about that too, and listening and really getting to know people at the core, which Desiree, you do very well too with, your questions that you've done on your She Centerfold, because you really ask questions, right?
2 hours and 45 minutes, 2 tracks of 2 different lives. Never have I been in 14 years have I ever been like, what? Yeah. You wait till you won't have to have these anymore. Teresa, they'll have all the answers right there. I mean, it's
high impact, open-ended questions, right? Get people talking, because
they're all open-ended. Yes.
Talk about themselves, and they'll share with you. And then it's amazing the points of what they used to call 6 points of separation. The different points that come up. You find commonality.
Yes.
And commonality takes care of many of the isms, which we've talked about before, racism, sexism, all those types of things, because you start to have somebody that you care about, and you start to have somebody that you understand a little bit better. So great points, Teresa. I love that interview. I like that interview. That's a good.
It's amazing. It really is.
Well, it's like you did at UPS. You had the 3-minute call every morning before they went out to an entire company to do it worldwide. I mean, 600,000 people on a phone call at the same time. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So my story is, or my book, actually, we'll start with my book first. It came out 2 years ago. It's by Kate Murphy. I wrote it down and naturally move it. You're not listening, what you're missing and why it matters. And the reason it's so powerful a book is I take it back to when I first started doing real estate in a level of dealing with corporate America. And so 35 years ago, I got my license and I progressed forward. And so we'll say back in 1991, 92, I started doing the foreclosure market and the impact it was going, because I love corporate America. It's where I grew up and all that kind of good stuff. And what happened was that when I called and I was doing for Freddie Mac, very true story, was working for Freddie Mac, and they asked me to report the eviction status, who was at actually a property, and call into this number. Well, when I called into the number, I'll never forget her name. Her name is Rita Morera. She worked for ERA. And I had a message. I said, yeah, you reached the voicemail for Rita Morera from ERA, blah, 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 blah. And I said, Hi, this is Desiree Patno. I'm supposed to be calling an eviction for Freddie Mac at such and such property, REO number, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know if I have the right number. So please call me back because I need to call it in within 24 hours. And I'm not sure this is the right number, but I double checked the number. That's it. She calls me back literally an hour later and says, you're the first person in 5 years who listened to my answering machine to see who I was and where I worked. Because of that, I got an entire account. I'm not exaggerating, that I got more than hundreds of properties per year because I was the only one that took the time to understand. And she explained to me that they were the middleman. They were a broker, dealer that was working for Freddie Mac, that you had to go through them. And their job was not to sell it, but just to report on the management of the eviction. Now it's common knowledge, but it was not common knowledge back in the 90s because people don't do it. And I headed up the REO division for all of Coldwell Banker back in the day, because the fact is they didn't have it. They didn't want anything to do with it. So completely left the company, went on my own, 20 years ago. But that was the biggest thing in my professional life of listening until recently. And that became all the years of negotiation, all the things that I've done. It became, I had 128 offers on one property. Imagine 4 days to load 128 offers on one house. You just want to go, okay, and not happening. So I had crew that did that. Obviously I had 13 people. One person's job was to load those offers. And when it fell out of escrow, I said, we're not reloading all those offers. You're going to take number 2, number 3, number 4. We're not going there, okay? Because technically you're supposed to do it in the system they had for Fannie. So my core was, it came to the point to the listening. I was able to take all the skills that I've had, no matter how many zeros are behind it now, it's the same principle of listening, absorbing, and negotiation. So to the point, it's the old adage is that I hear you, let me think about it, I'm quiet, and then I go in for the kill, and I'm able to put together, whether it's $1 billion deal now versus then say a $50,000 deal when it was back in the chattel property dealing with, mobile homes that are on land and how to work around that. So from a professional standpoint, that's where I have had my greatest strength, is listening to what the person's actually saying without being in the room. Remember, you listen to an answer machine.
Right.
We don't think how powerful that. And from a kid's perspective, the greatest story that I can share is that you've heard it before. Not everyone has heard it, but my children, when they got sick, with leukemia or whatever, I was the best mom ever was there. But when it came time to listen to their needs as they were growing, I was so focused on providing the best that one could provide for them in the biggest way that was all consumed in it. And so for me to sit there and take the time to listen, I'd give them, hey, yeah, okay, this is what you got to do, da, 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 da. I was helping them as a mother, I thought, and as a leader, but I wasn't being a mom to them and listening to their needs and what they were having time to absorb. So it took a long, long time. We're at a good place now, but I can tell everyone that when you're dealing with logistics of what we have right now, the greatest thing I say in the personal level, it doesn't matter everything that's going around. You have to take that moment to look at that child in the face, understand that, and take that time to do something. I love your idea, Tami, of doing it quick versus then waiting it, because we all know the longer we delay something in a week or to say or put it to another time, something ultimately will postpone it or change it or do something to it. And I know that's for me. So I love the ideas. If you do it, be spontaneous, get it done now.
Gotta strike when the iron's hot, right?
That's right. That's right. Hey, I want to throw something out to the group. So, and I think it was mentioned by a couple of folks, but so what happens? How do you listen if you don't agree? If you don't agree, how do you listen without condoning or agreeing? What if you really have disagreement? Anybody got any tricks of the trade or tips?
Well, I think sometimes you have to, first of all, sometimes listening, I don't know about you, but I've been in situations where it's altered by listening to someone who has a different opinion. It kind of, oh, I never thought of that. It starts to open your mind, even you still may not agree with their position. You can still leave on good terms and say, that's not how I considered it, or that, but you make a great point. And that's something I'm going to have to go back and think about, because what you said to me really has made me think about what the position you just stated is. I think a lot of times that happens, especially when you're so far apart that that your arguments, and you look at it in the political arena all the time, right? You're so far apart. You have to start to come and say, okay, I don't agree, but what can we agree on? Okay, I don't agree on that, but we do agree that this is important, right? And so you start to be able to find commonality in what you do agree on. And then you start to also realize, okay, they're passionate about this. I really haven't taken a look at that. And I need to kind of open my eyes and be open-minded, as do they, right? A lot of times people walk away. I don't know if you've ever done that and said, the next time you talk to them, hey, I know where your position is. I don't always agree with it, but I can understand where you're coming from, and I can understand what your position is. I think that's what we need more of is that understanding, empathy versus this anger and, hate and all that comes into it. So
Anxiety.
For me, that's what's really important, is to find commonality in the differences.
And
Because then
I think, go ahead, Tami. Go ahead.
We're seeing so much polarization, right? And we're seeing such extremes, and everyone wants to go right for the jugular with an opinion. It doesn't matter whether it's watching Johnny Depp and his ex with a court battle, politics. It doesn't matter what it is. There's everybody has an opinion, and I find that what has worked the best for me is help me understand where you're coming from. What made you come to this conclusion? Where did you get this perspective from? Help me understand. Tell me more. That a lot of times as they start going through, you realize they grew up totally different than you did.
Mm-hmm.
They were exposed to things that were totally different. And a lot of times you can actually have incredible empathy and really pick up on where they're coming from. And I always ask people if they have an open mind when it comes to any type of conflict. You have an open mind. I'm willing to sit here and actively listen, and I absolutely want to understand your perspective. Are you willing to have an open mind? And then usually whether you can come to the conclusion of we're going to agree to disagree, or that I completely understand this, but this part is a little tough for me. You have an appreciation as human beings. And I believe that regardless of whether you're spiritual, religious, no matter where your belief system ends up, I think that everyone can agree that we're all connected. Yep. And so if you can kind of start off with that we're all connected, and I don't believe one human being wants to actually harm another human being. I don't believe that that's the case. So help me understand how you came to this conclusion. Help me understand how you gained this perspective. And that just really opens a lot of doors and makes them much more comfortable to talk. And usually, even if you agree to disagree, there's a respect line now that wasn't there before.
Right. And sometimes I think just going back to the person and saying, I considered everything we discussed. And so, maybe you made some changes in a plan, or maybe we decided to stay the course, right? But I listened and I considered it, because it allows you to minimize unintended consequences that may come up later from having somebody who felt they never were listened to, right? Mm-hmm. Because that person, if they feel they've never been listened to, there will be consequences from, what's going on with them with other people or whatever the case may be. So it's difficult sometimes, but I think being able to be honest and say, no, I never even considered that. I mean, so let me think about it. Teresa, to your point, right? Desiree, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I love all three stories. And that's what's so great about this group. Is all the diversity of thought and how you get to that end game, right? To have it. And that's where I come in is that I'm pretty strong-willed, like all of us. And sometimes I am to the point that I like to talk too much. And so to me, I was able to go to other verticals, to go to industries that are not my specialty, to learn about those industries. And then I had to be forced to listen to them, because the fact is it was something that I couldn't say that I knew a lot of. And so by forcing myself to listen to something that I would think I was wrong or they were wrong, it allowed me to go, oh, their perspective is I understand where they're coming from. And not that they were always right, But the idea is that it was a fast scale to becoming a 505 versus then a 404 in college versus then starting at the very bottom. And that led me into where I am today in the verticals of making sure the ecosystem that we talk about and the women in housing real estate ecosystem. And that thought allowed me to go to the ability to say, okay, take a step back and understand their experiences, their journeys where they got are different. And you need to listen to from their perspective, even though you might have a different path of solving their problem, their analogy of what they're looking at from the data points that they got in are very different. So the idea is that I learned when I interviewed Liz Tumulty that the media source comes, and we're all, journalists now. And the problem is that we're not getting the same data points, and it's a whole truth or half truth. So when we're listening to someone, it's like you and I we got the call. How many, and help the Lord and help the world and help everything with all the mass shootings. But we were having a conversation about how many there are. You had a report, I had a report, but it was in the interpretation of what was defined, what it looked like, and where we're getting that information from. But the idea is listening, were we on point with each other, what's going on? And I really think that is one of the most key things when we're listening is the information coming to the table with the same facts, or are we having half facts or not the full facts, right? So to me, that was a really good point for me. And it's really helped me as I gotten older to take a breath, take a pause. If I'm emotionally charged, walk away, come back and go, to Teresa's point, you're right. You know what? I thought about what you said. I had to do it in my own way, go work out some calories, and then come back and flush it out and I'll feel better.
Yep, you need time to process sometimes, right? I'm processing. I want to mention one more thing, because I think, Teresa, both you and Desiree talked about the table, right? The seat at the table. I think it's critical, and Teresa, you brought it up. There's a lot of people now that are maybe getting the seat, but they're not getting the time to give their opinion, or perhaps they're shy. That there's so many cultural differences, so many different things going on. Maybe they lack confidence. Maybe they're just more of an introvert, right? And they're listening, like you said, Teresa, around and waiting to give their opinion. Helping those people and their thoughts come out at the table just helps you make so many better decisions. It just really improves your decision-making process. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about the things, how do you get people to talk sometimes?
Goldman Sachs actually added more women to the table of their board, and they decided that they did it actually even for financial reasons, not even for being good citizens, but that the more diverse the table was, the more money the company would make.
Right.
And it was because they had so many different perspectives, and so that they were representative of a much larger audience. And I think that's a great lesson to learn for everybody. And I think that that's really so important. People really do just want to be heard, but sometimes you have to pull it out of them, right? So sometimes even actively listening is to just say, you know what, I haven't heard from you yet. I would love to hear your perspective. Right. Or I'd love to hear your viewpoint, or I'd love to hear your opinion. And then they're a little more comfortable because they're shy that at least they got asked.
And making it a safe place for those opinions to come out and not just attacking the person. I've seen leaders, right? Oh, it's a safe place. And then someone says something they disagree with and they attack it, So yeah.
Or they're thought of as not a team player, or
right.
That happens quite a bit. And I think a lot of times, to Tami's point, is you also have to think about everyone is different. And that's what the diversity of thought and the diversity of opinions and diversity of the backgrounds comes great into a boardroom when you do have different perspectives. In the personalities, there's also different perspectives as well. And culturally, there's also different perspectives. And just because we want somebody to speak doesn't mean, then you're kind of putting them in a microaggression scenario where you're like wanting your conformity, them to conform to you versus you to conform to their personality. And so, sometimes things like, oh, you really are quiet, you're not speaking much, or you're not really, that's not a way to approach it. And everyone has a way that they feel comfortable saying. So a lot of times what I think is great is to talk to people in advance when they have taken a board position and saying, tell me what your style is and how do you like to contribute? Do you prefer contributing via email? Do you prefer, are you vocal? And you immediately know and start to see or sense those that are vocally, expressive in the meetings and those that are not. But then if you take into account their perspective and say, hey, after our meeting, send me an email because you told me that's your perspective, the best way that you feel, and then we'll share it with everyone so that we can get the feedback that's really important from you. I think that is something that boardrooms are doing a little bit more of, because not conforming them to you is really a great way that you're listening to them.
That's a great point, Teresa. And, it's almost a type of coaching, helping them learn to express themselves in whatever way they want, whatever media they want, right? Written or verbal or whatever the case may be. That's a great point. I know we're getting close. I want to just mention my book. I want to mention my book because it's not a book, it's a podcast. Because I've mentioned some books before, but I don't know. I'm sure everyone's heard of Malcolm Gladwell. He's written tons of books, right? The Outlier, all kinds of David and Goliath, all kinds. But he's got a podcast out there and it's called Revisionist History. And if you haven't listened, I would tell everybody, listen to just one and you will be amazed, because what I think about for myself is, wow, I wasn't listening to a lot of things that have been going on, because you hear a whole different side of history, and it's amazing what you learn. So I want to throw that out. Tami, any book that comes to mind or any podcast?
I was going to mention a book, but before that, there was a great radio show. It's not on anymore because he passed away, but Paul Harvey, which some of you might not even be old enough to remember, but his show was The Rest of the Story.
Yes,
and
it was
so
awesome.
We had a whole perspective of, and now the rest of the story. And
Right.
I loved it because when you saw the news, you only saw one perspective, and you didn't hear the whole thing. And then you'd hear the background and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. And with Malcolm Gladwell, that is very similar. That you hear this whole different history, and you're like, wow,
Right.
I can't believe this happened around me. But this is not specifically to listening, although it will help you to listen more. And it will help people to actually become better listeners and enjoy the process. And it's called The Dream Manager. And the reason is because then you can actually ask people questions and share about what their dreams are. And the closer you get to asking about what their dreams are and getting them to go their imagination, you're getting them to stretch as human beings. And they also get more comfortable talking to you so that they'll open up about other things as well. And it's a positive frame of mind, and mindset's incredibly important. So I found that that's a great book for getting people to really listen.
Oh, thanks, Tami. That sounds great too. Desiree, any other comments from you?
Yes, thank you. So Tami's the book haven of life. I mean, she's got more books coming out. If there's any book anyone's listening or wants to know about, just ask Tami. She's got them. She's got a Rolodex that goes on. So I just looked up Malcolm Gladwell, and rule number 1 for him. Does anyone know what the rule is?
Listening. Darn.
Stand up straight with your shoulders back. My mother was the epitome of doing that. She would take her middle finger and take her knuckle and run it down the back of my spine and do this, because I am more body than I am legs. Even though I'm 6 foot tall, I'm more body than legs. And I was just like, okay, so I like this guy. I'm going to, after you two endorse him, how good he is. And to be very candid, you both all of you have just made me think, I forgot about podcasts in the sense of me listening, because I'm so used to being on Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces or whatever and jumping on stage and talking. I'm listening to them, but I don't like all the interaction sometimes because it's become too opinionated and not where I want to go with it, I guess, is the best way of saying it. So listening to a quality podcast would be really cool for the mind to set in, especially with people who really resonate. I mean, it was very interesting because what is the theme of this? Listening, right? Listen to the core of going on to it. So that being said, I think the greatest thing that we all can do is, for my tip that I'd like to have in parting, is we can't do things as we used to do them. We have to do it as the world has changed, and what your experience and someone else's experience and everyone you know is very different. And I believe that our empathy of life, our love of life, our quality of life, our ecosystem of our sustainability of everything will be because we do listen to the earth as the sound, our birds, our animals, our plants as they rustle, the people that we love, the people we don't even know, like the homeless. I'm gonna steal your homeless story, girl. I'm all over it. Monda Webb, you're gonna have the story, and I want you to make a short film on it. But the idea is that the tip is we have to take a moment to have silence of listening to what's happening around us. And I think that's the most important thing that we can get. And that I'd like to steal the show for 2 minutes. We're going to have our conference, our annual conference, November 17th and 18th at the Resort at Squaw Creek in Tahoe. That's North Tahoe. It's going to be about sustainability in all aspects. So you think about the sustainability of what we're talking about, from the ecosystem of life, from the 3 different sectors and pillars that go through it. But most importantly, if you think about what happened in 2019, our last in-person conference, what did we say? Quality of life, health, and aging population were going to be our biggest disruptor. And what happened between 2020 and now? We're seeing that evolution. And having it at a 6,200 elevation, you'll never know it's that high, Teresa. It's flat, okay? It's flat. Unless you start climbing the mountains and we go up to Lake Shirley. But the idea is that we could see what's happening with nature. We can see what's going on in one of the most beautiful places in North America that's been voted years for the view. So the idea is that this mastermind of leadership are coming together and having it. So I just want to put that out there. So thank you very much, Kelly. It's been phenomenal.
Excellent. Excellent. Hey, can we go around real quick listening tip? Teresa, how about from you?
Well, more often than not, and I love this quote, people who vent or complain or want to express themselves already know how to handle their current situation. They're just looking for someone to see and appreciate their struggle. And that's a quote by Michael Sorensen. So just think about that when the next person that wants to talk to you, listen to them, and that's a lot of times what they just need.
Excellent. Tami, how about you?
Listening is being in the present tense. And too often people are in the past, which is they're stressed because they have unfinished business, or they're already catastrophizing about the future, and that's where they end up with anxiety. But you are the calmest and when you're in the present tense, and you grow the most in the present tense. So listening keeps you there, and it definitely builds much stronger relationships.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to close us out. I think we're right at the end, Desiree. I'm going to just say, listening is learning. Right? Listening is learning, and we can all learn, and we can all improve and get better. And we do that through listening. And all of you, I so appreciate the conversation. Great tips for everybody. And again, I love the Jubilee hat. I should have.
Right? Isn't that beautiful? Okay. So real quick, Kelly, before you say the last word, Be Present is next month. So Tami, every one of you just led right into the perfect segment. So the next principle number 8, is be present, which is exactly what Tami just said. And that is our 8th principle, and that'll be on July 7th. So right after you all have an incredible July 4th weekend, that'll be fantastic. So thank you very much, Kelly.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. We'll see you all soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.